السلام علیکم اینڈ ویلکم بیک ٹو آور چینل وی میٹر. میں ہوں آپ کی ہوسٹ ہنا زیدی اینڈ آئی ایم ویری ایکسائٹیڈ ٹو ہیو یو آل ہیئر ود اس ٹوڈے. اگر آپ ہمیں پہلی بار سن رہے ہیں تو وی میٹر ایک ایسا پلیٹ فارم ہے جہاں ہم اپنے پازیٹیو میسیجز کے ساتھ بات کرتے ہیں مینٹل ویل بینگ اینڈ سیلف کیئر کی. تو ہمارا یہ سفر ایک سمپل سے آئیڈیا کے ساتھ شروع ہوا، ایک ایسا پلیٹ فارم بنانے کا خیال جہاں ہم کھل کر بات کر سکیں کہ کیسے ہم خود اپنا اور اپنی ذہنی صحت کا خیال رکھ سکتے ہیں اور کیسے ہم اپنی زندگی کو اور بھی بہتر اور خوشگوار بنا سکتے ہیں. تو ابھی تک وی میٹر پہ ہم نے بات کی ہے سیلف ایکسپلوریشن کی، سیلف کیئر کی، ڈفرینٹ پرسپیکٹیو آف مینٹل ویل بینگ، دا کنیکشن آف باڈی مائنڈ اینڈ سول اینڈ الاٹ مور. اور ساتھ ساتھ ہمیں موقع ملا کچھ ماہرین اور گیسٹ اسپیکرز سے بات کرنے کا جنہوں نے ہمیں بہت کچھ سکھایا. آپ بھی ہمارے ساتھ اس سفر میں شامل ہو سکتے ہیں. ہمارے چینل کو سبسکرائب کیجئے اور شامل ہو جائیے بہت سارے پازیٹیو اور پروگریسو کنٹینٹ کے لیے. اینڈ بلیو می دیر از اے لاٹ مور ٹو کم انشاءاللہ. سو آج کی پوڈ کاسٹ بھی بہت انٹرسٹنگ ہونے والی ہے. تو یہاں میرے ساتھ موجود ہیں میری کو ہوسٹ مس سعیدہ مسرت، جن کو آپ پہلے بھی ہمارے ساتھ پوڈ کاسٹ میں سن چکے ہیں. جی سعیدہ مسرت، کیسی ہیں آپ؟ اور آج آپ ہمارے لیے کیا لے کر آئی ہیں اس پوڈ کاسٹ کے تھرو؟ جی اوور ٹو یو سعیدہ.
السلام علیکم ہنا، تھینک یو سو مچ فار ہیونگ می ہیئر ود یو اگین. اور میں نے کسی کو کیا لے کر آنا ہے، ہم تو ان کا شکریہ ادا کرنا چاہتے ہیں جنہوں نے ہمیں یہ اپرچونٹی دی ہے، یہ موقع دیا ہے کہ ہم ان کے ساتھ یہ سیشن کر پائیں. تو ہنا، میرے ساتھ بہت ہی خوبصورت مہمان، بہت ہی بڑی شخصیت، بہت بڑی ہستی تعلیم کے شعبے میں جنہوں نے بہت کارنامے ادا کیے ہیں اور جنہوں نے آئی تھنک دے آر دا پائنیئرس ان ایجوکیشن ان پاکستان. سو ان کا نام اگر میں لوں تو میرا خیال ہے کہ مجھے ان کو ڈاکٹر پردھان نہیں، سر صدرالدین پردھان کہہ کے بلانا ہوگا.
بالکل.
پاکستان میں حکومت پاکستان کے علاوہ اگر کسی ادارے نے تعلیم اور صحت میں بہت زیادہ پاکستانی گورنمنٹ کو سپورٹ کیا ہے تو وہ اور کوئی ادارہ نہیں بلکہ آغا خان ڈیولپمنٹ نیٹ ورک ہے، جس نے کہ دور افتادہ کے علاقوں میں تعلیم کو عام کیا، صحت کی سہولیات میسر کی. اور تعلیم کے شعبے کو مد نظر رکھتے ہوئے ڈاکٹر صدرالدین پردھان ہمارے ساتھ موجود ہیں. انہوں نے اپنا جرنی، اپنا سفر کیسے سٹارٹ کیا، میرا خیال ہے ان سے علاوہ کوئی بہتر نہیں بتا پائے گا. کمیونٹی سکولز ہیں، ساؤتھ ہے، نارتھ ہے، ٹیچرز کی ٹریننگ ہے، کتابیں لکھنے پہ بہت سارے جنرلز میں اپنی کنٹریبیوشن دینے میں ڈاکٹر پردھان سے آگے کوئی میرا خیال ہے ابھی تک نہیں جا سکتا.
بالکل.
اور میرا خیال ہے کہ ہم ڈاکٹر پردھان کو خود پہلے دعوت دیں گے کہ وہ ہمارے ساتھ اپنا سفر کا آغاز کریں، لیکن اس سے پہلے کہ وہ اس پوڈ کاسٹ کی ٹون سیٹ کریں تو میں صرف ایک چھوٹی سی چیز ان کو ڈیڈیکیٹ کرنا چاہتی ہوں.
جی.
انجینئرس میک بریجز، آرٹسٹ میک پینٹنگس، scientists make rockets, but teachers make them all. Sir, welcome on board. Please share your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Musra. Thank you very much, Hina. It is such a pleasure to be talking to you. I've had such an interesting journey, and in a way, not even sure where to start, but because of the target audience, I think I'll start from my childhood, because that will set the tone of what I am and how I became what I am.
جی سر.
And I hope that it will not take away too much of your time, but I think it's an interesting journey. I was born in Kenya. My forefathers came from what was at that time Greater India. At that time Pakistan was not yet established. My forefathers migrated to East Africa around 1860, 1870. And my father came to Kenya in about 1915. My mother, like me, was born in Kenya in a small place called Kisumu, which is now the third biggest city in Kenya. When I was born, in fact, the area where we lived in Kisumu, there was no electricity. So we were on what was called the hillside. In Swahili, it is called Milimani area. And the area closer to the lake, Kisumu is located on Lake Victoria. So the area closer to the lake had electricity. Where we lived, I mean, it was very close to a jungle as I grew up. And in fact, there were times when we were very young, you could even see snakes around our place. So that was the beginning.
जी
But you see, what I remember of my childhood was it was a very happy childhood. Happy in the sense that we were very close family. We had a mother who was extremely caring. She, as I said, she was born in Kisumu in 1917. Her father moved to Kisumu in 1902, and in fact, her father was amongst the first two people of Asian extract who migrated to Kisumu. My mother she got education up to class 8, but that itself was an amazing achievement because living in a far, far off place to be educated was very important. And she studied everything through Gujarati medium. And she was also very fluent in reading a language which not many people know about it. It's called Konjiki. Now, what was very interesting about my mother is I grew up and I saw was that she was, whenever she had time, she would be reading. She would be reading storybooks, she would be reading magazines. They were all in Gujarati. But it had a huge impact on us because we saw that our mother was reading. So, automatically we got interested in reading, whether it was Gujarati or English or whatever language it was. So that became a very important aspect for us. So as I grew up, mother was always there. My father was out earning. He had a small business, little far away from where we used to live. But mother was always there, and we were five siblings. So she had a lot of time for us. In fact, I even remember learning how to play cards from her, and I must say, we were about 5 years old. Always very supportive. Never made us feel that we were poor because I come from a family which was not very well to do, but there was always food on the table, and she was always very encouraging. So I got registered in a nursery school when I was about 3 years old.
जी
Extremely happy memories. I still remember the name of my teacher, who was Malek Isa Popat. And I still remember that we used to eat out of colored plates, and we used to drink milk. And I remember we used to get sevaya for snacks and cookies or biscuits. And I remember we used to have lots of fun playing. I had lots of good friends, and time just passed, and you know, very happy time in the school. The environment was very colorful. So by the time the school ended, it was about lunchtime, about 12:30, 1 o'clock, and we would walk home. It was about 2 kilometers away, and we had no problems. I mean, even if I was 4 years old, walking that distance never really bothered me. So we went home, and lunch was always ready. And in the afternoon, it was playtime. I had friends living not very far, so took out our shoes and just ran to their places, or they came over. Across where I used to live, there was a small cricket ground, so we would go there. Not very far from it was a market. And one very interesting thing that used to happen early in the afternoon was that we used to get 5 cents. It was about uh, 3 or 4 pesos, and we would buy sugarcane and munched on sugarcane without realizing that that was strengthening our teeth. And all this was going on, and it was really happy time. But what was also very interesting was my parents were very religious. So almost every evening we would walk to our prayer house, the Jamaat Khan, and so the social structure there had a huge impact on us. I mean, I would see people doing voluntary work, and very soon I also started doing voluntary work. Kisumu is a warm place, and in the evenings when people came for prayers for Maghrib, we would serve them water. And in order to cool the water before about an hour earlier, we would go to people's houses and get some ice and put it together with the water. By the time the people started coming for prayers, the water was ready. It was cold. So that that itself was a huge learning experience. At that time, one doesn't realize it, but you were interacting with people. They respected you for what you were doing, and you started communicating with them. And I think those are the kinds of things that often we don't realize that part of the informal education has a huge impact on how we develop as members of communities. All these things I realized much later in life when I myself was engaged in community work in Pakistan, both in Karachi and Gilgit-Baltistan and Chitral. So that was my early uh, education. So I started my nursery school, and once that was done, I moved over to a primary school. Now, in those days, the primary school was run in the ground floor of the Jamaat Khana. Again, if you look at how Gilgit-Baltistan evolved, education started there, and the classes were actually held in Langar Khana, close to the Jamaat Khana. And there were so many commonalities that it's only later on in life that I realized. However, what was very interesting is that by the time I was in grade 2, a very beautiful Aga Khan Primary School was constructed very close to where the Jamaat Khana was. And in fact, the school is still there, and it still looks very, very beautiful. It was ready in 1952, and why I remember that date is because at that time we were a British colony, and the Queen had just taken over. The Queen of England had just been made the Queen because her father had passed away, and we did a lot of work to make the school ready. And in fact, we won a little prize for all the decorations that we had done. So from grade 2 onwards, I moved to this new school, and went to grade 3. And in grade 3, one fine day, about 3 months into the program, I was called by told by the teacher that I should go and see the principal. I was wondering, why should somebody ask me to go and see the principal? And the principal said that, look, we would like you to now move to class 4. And I said, I've not finished my class 3. All my friends are in class 3. They said, no, you go and you tell your mother that this is what has happened, because they had already talked to my parents. What had happened was that they thought that I was performing very well academically, so they moved me to class 4. Now, I'm saying all this because, you see, while the parents would feel very good that, oh my God, our child got a double promotion, but what we don't realize is that there was a now an age difference. You see, all my friends were in class 3. I now had to go to class 4 and start all over again. And, had to make new friends, etc. Fortunately, I still maintained my friendship with those people who were in class 3. And in fact, even as we talk, I still communicate with them through WhatsApp almost every day. One of them is living in Kenya, one of them is living in Vancouver, and I'm here in Ottawa. So that's how life evolved for me. I went to, at the end of the class 4, all the boys from the school were kicked out because it was supposed to be a girls' school. So now we had to look for a new school. We went to a government primary school. In those days, the government primary schools in Kenya were very, very good quality. So I moved to a new school, and in a way it was very fortuitous because there now I started making new friends. And but in Kenya we had a system that after grade 7, if you passed a central examination, you would move to secondary education. So after class 7, I moved to secondary education. So my class 8, 9, 10, and 11 were in what was called secondary school. And one other very interesting thing that I think the listeners will want to hear is that as a colony, the British government practiced apartheid. So the school that I went to, the government primary school, was actually entirely made up of Asian students. Nearby, we had an African school, and in some other parts of Kenya, we had European schools. But in our school, we only had Asians. So, we had Asian, majority of them were from Gujarat. So we were Gujarati speaking, but there was Hindi, there was Urdu, there was Kutchi, there was Sindhi. So all these languages were being spoken. And amazingly enough, I learned all those languages without realizing that I was learning new languages. But in the classroom, the medium was English, and we were studying Gujarati as a second language. When we were studying Gujarati as a second language, we had to study Hindi also because all our poetry, kavita, was written in Hindi. So in a way, I was learning new languages without even realizing the power that the languages have and had in my future development. So, after grade 11, we took O levels, and I was fortunate. I performed well. And for my A levels, I traveled to Uganda in a place called Mbale. There again, it was a government school, again very high standard. But there was a difference. In Uganda, schools were multiracial. So in our school, we had Asian and African students. We hardly had any European students, but we had Asian and African students. So it was a new experience. It was an amazing experience to be able to interact with the majority population of Kenya, who were the indigenous black Africans. So I did my A levels there. At that time, I was my residence was in an Aga Khan hostel in Mbale. Again, it was a very, very good hostel, very good facilities, and it was a dormitory system. So in my first year, I was in a dormitory where there were 8 students. In the second year, I was appointed the hostel head, so I had my own separate rooms. But it was an amazing experience. It was a residential place. Again, I met a lot of people, children, and I can just tell you a little side story that when I moved to Ottawa not very long ago, I came across a person who was in the same hostel. He was much younger, and we are now very good friends. So, this was years ago, 60, 70 years ago, we were together, and now again we are together. So this is a very small world that we live in. Okay. Anyways, I completed my A levels, and I was supposed to be going to Nairobi University. I had a choice of engineering or sciences. After a lot of thought, I decided to go for sciences rather than engineering because I thought the scope of science would be much, much broader. And I never once regretted that because I thought it was a good choice. So I was getting ready to Nairobi University. I was about 10 days away from it when I was informed that a scholarship that I had applied for to study in Sweden had been approved, and I was supposed to be going to Sweden. So now I had to make a decision. I was 10 days away from going to Nairobi University, and I now got the scholarship to study in Sweden. I had done some homework. My uncles had been to Sweden. I had read about Sweden, and everybody said that it was a very, very good country to go to. And this was a special program. Sweden was trying to help Kenya develop capacity because we were about to become independent, and they needed well qualified people. So after consulting with my parents, I decided to go to Sweden. So it was, I've never even sat in an aircraft when I decided to go to Sweden. So I mean, there was real drama. I went from my town Kisumu to the capital city Nairobi. First time I had sat in an aircraft from Nairobi. I was lucky that my uncle was there to pick me up. He took me home for dinner. A few hours later, I was on a flight to go from Nairobi to Sweden. In those days, aircrafts made many stops because they had to refuel. You know, we didn't have those big jets like we now have. So I went from Nairobi to Khartoum, Khartoum to Benghazi in Libya. From Libya, I went to Athens, then I went to Geneva, and then I went to Copenhagen, and finally I reached Stockholm or Uppsala, where I was a student. So then I studied in Sweden. I did my science degree, my bachelor's in sciences. I got honors in physics, and then I studied for an honors in chemistry. And I got a scholarship to do my master's in both physics and chemistry. I opted for chemistry, did my PhD. While I was doing my PhD, my professor, who had a long foresight, he said, why don't you also take an advanced diploma in education because it will be very useful to you. So I did that simultaneously. And by 1969, I was ready. I was ready to go back home. And I was extremely lucky because just around that time, the Swedish government had built a very beautiful science college in Nairobi to again develop capacity within the country. And I was offered a job already while I was in Sweden. So I really didn't have to hunt for a job. I went there. I was received at the airport by not only my family, but the principal of the college. And a couple of days later, I was a faculty member of the college. I mean, it all sounds very, very simple, but I mean, it was an amazing time. So I started teaching sciences. I taught chemistry. It was a teachers' college also. So I realized that simultaneously it would be an important thing to start practicing some of my skills. So I registered as a voluntary teacher. I taught at Aga Khan Academy in Nairobi. I taught at one other school. And I was also very lucky because, in the college, we had a very large number of Swedish staff because, they were just starting it off and developing capacity so that after 10 years, Kenyans would take over. And I was, in fact, one of the first Kenyans to go there. Now, because I spoke Swedish, I was able to also teach their children because their children already had a distance learning program through an organization in Sweden. So I used to teach them chemistry and mathematics. So that again gave me a lot of experience of how to deal with children. And here it was another language, but it was fun. I was learning, they were learning, and life went on. And suddenly a major issue came up in East Africa. In 1972, the in Uganda there was a leader called President Idi Amin.
Yes, sir.
He um, uh, decided that he wanted to expel all the people of Asian and European origin from Uganda. And he just gave a decree that in 3 months they had to get out. I mean, it was unbelievable. And it created chaos. Initially, we thought he was just joking, but he was not. And Asians and Europeans were amongst the most well educated people. And suddenly they were gone. And they controlled businesses. So, in a way, there was chaos in Uganda. But that's the way he wanted it. But that issue gave people like me amazing opportunities. And how did those opportunities come? Well, you know, at that time, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania had a common examination board. It was called East African Examinations Council. Now, suddenly, a lot of people who belonged there from Uganda were gone. So, people like me, I was pretty young at that time. I was only 28 years old, and I was told to become the chief examiner of chemistry. While I had a PhD, I didn't have as much experience as others would have. But I was thrown on the deep end of the pool, so we had to learn in a hurry. We took crash courses on assessment practices, curriculum, etc. And suddenly we were uh, running the show. But what I learned at that time was something phenomenal, that the human mind has a lot of capacity. When you are put in a situation like this, you learn in a hurry. So it was a huge experience. So while I was teaching chemistry education, curriculum development, material development, etc. And this now continued for until 1979. So from 72 to 79, I was the what we call in Urdu a karta harta of chemistry for both O levels and A levels in Kenya. So and during that time, of course, I had got married. I had 3 children. Mashallah, they're still there. One was Dr. Almina Pardhan, who was with me as a faculty at Khan University. I've got a son called Azhar, who is a dentist. I've got another son who works with another Acadian university in Central Asia called University of Central Asia. So, mashallah, they also now are performing well. But anyways, they were very young at that time. Now, so now this is just as the background where my dealings in education came. You see, one interesting thing about my stay in Sweden was that, see, I lived there for about 7 years. So when I was in Sweden,
Yes, sir.
there were no masjids, there were no Jamaat khanas. So, but I had to keep very, very strong to the faith. So I religiously practiced Islam, and I think that really gave me a lot of strength. And I think this is something very important, that if we help children to develop that practice, it really helps them so much in the future. So that was one of the things that I wanted to say about Sweden. The second thing that I wanted to say about Sweden was that, you see, when I went to Sweden, there were very, very few people from Asia or from Africa living there. So in a way, we were pioneers, and it was a most amazing experience to try and fit into a predominantly white society. They were very, very good, very nice people. So I just thought it was important to recognize the fact that we were very lucky that we got that opportunity. Okay, so coming back, so as I was saying, I became the chief examiner of chemistry, and this went on until 1979. In the meantime, of course, I was also working with the Science Teachers College, and gradually there was progress. I was promoted from being a lecturer to a senior lecturer, then a principal lecturer. We didn't have professors that time. We were principal lecturer, and I became a deputy principal. Now, why I'm saying that is also very important is because Kenya is a predominantly African country. For an Asian to be appointed at level was a real pride for me, because it means that they really appreciated the kind of work I was doing. Uh, One thing that I thought was extremely important was, when you deal with human beings, you must make sure that you accept them for what they are. And this is where your emotional intelligence comes into play. See, uh, you you accept for what people are. There is integrity involved there. There is cooperation involved there. There is, your social skills have to become extremely, extremely important.
Yes.
And if you really understand what they are saying, and if they understand what you are saying, that's the most important part of social skills and social interaction. So those were very important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pradhan. Listening to your journey felt like watching a captivating movie, as if we could see, imagine, and feel it unfold. And I must say, your storytelling is truly mesmerizing. And I have no doubt our audience would be just as hooked as we are here. And very interestingly, your success journey is even more relatable to us, as we have discussed in one of our previous episodes. A happy, peaceful childhood, nurturing parents, and playful, positive environment lays the foundation of a positive and progressive personality. So, here is a big learning point for all of us who wants to raise good human beings out of our children so that they can contribute and give back to society. Healthy, happy, playful childhood is the main ingredient. Thank you so much, sir. Your words brought this to life so beautifully. And with that, we wrap up our first part of our incredible conversation with Dr. Pradhan. But to our listeners, trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming in the next part, as the next part covers Dr. Pradhan's experience in working with various communities in Pakistan in relationship with the education sector and tackling some powerful questions raised by Ma'am Saida Musarat. So stay tuned, stay connected, subscribe to our channel We Matter, and make comments if you want to say anything regarding this podcast. Until then, take care of yourself and see you soon with the part 2 of Dr. Pardhan's opening session. Take care and Allah Hafiz.